Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back. I got actually a really cool dish for you today. It's called a Filipino dish called Arroz Caldo. It's a chicken rice porridge, except I'm going to keto-fy it a little bit and use cauliflower rice instead of regular rice, so it should be a little bit healthier to say the least. A couple interesting challenges here though. The rice is such a central part of the dish. It lends its creaminess to the porridge, also texturally. So we're gonna have to do a couple tricks to get that all right, but I think I came pretty close here. So let's see what we can do about it.
So to get started with this dish, we're obviously gonna need cauliflower rice, about 2 heads worth. We're gonna need a couple shallots, about 7 to 8 cloves of garlic, about an inch of ginger, and then some scallions. So to get started with the cauliflower rice, we're obviously gonna need cauliflower. So I'm gonna break this down here. I usually start by cutting out the stem, removing the leaves, and then cutting off the florets. Feel free to use prepackaged cauliflower rice. I know it's a lot easier. I'm just a little bit opposed to how expensive the cauliflower rice is. So I try to make my own, even though it's absurdly messy, it's coarse, it gets everywhere. But try to save a few bucks here and there, especially when you cook as much as I do. Every little bit helps. And once you got the 2 cauliflowers broken down into florets, I just chop them into smaller pieces so they can fit in my food processor. It's going to depend on how big your food processor is, but just try to make sure it fits. Don't have to go too fine or anything. And then you just start filling your food processor. Don't overfill it too much. I did this in 2 batches. And then go ahead and pulse for a couple seconds. And then once you've finished food processing your cauliflower rice, just go ahead and set that into a bowl and set that aside for a little bit later. So moving on to the chicken. Here you can see I'm using bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. The reason for this is I actually wanted the crispy chicken skin for this dish. I thought it would be a good complement to the creamy, soft congee mixture of the dish. But feel free to use skinless, boneless if that's really what you want. I almost always use chicken thighs for almost all my chicken dishes. You can use breast if you want to. It might come out a little bit drier, but whatever you want to use. Here you can see I'm just seasoning both sides of the chicken, skin side and the flesh side also, and then we'll start by searing off the skin. Speaking of searing that chicken, let's go ahead and do that. So I got my pan nice and hot, threw in a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil, and then just started throwing in the chicken, skin side down. You don't want to overcrowd the pan too much. I got about 4 thighs in there. And then just give them a quick press down once you put them in. Just make sure that you get good contact with the skillet and the skin so you get some good browning. After about 5 or 10 minutes or so, you can check on your chicken skin, make sure that it's nice and crispy. If it's nice and crispy, you can go ahead and take them out and set them aside. You don't even need to cook the other side just yet. It's going to go in the oven a little bit later, so it will cook through then, and we'll just keep it nice and tender. And then just go ahead and rinse and repeat with any other chicken thighs you have. For my baking dish, I fit in 6 chicken thighs, so I ended up cooking a little bit extra. But if you have a larger baking dish, you can probably fit in a couple more. So after searing off your chicken skin, you should have a decent amount of chicken fat left over in the pan. And we're actually going to utilize that to infuse some of our aromatics. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our garlic chips. With the garlic, go ahead and slice it into thin strips, as even as you can, and then we're going to fry them in our chicken fat. Go ahead and swirl them around, make sure everything's evenly coated. You want to go a little bit of lower heat for this just because the garlic chips could fry and burn really easily. So a medium to a medium low heat for this, and just be patient with it. Keep swirling around and wait for the garlic to start browning. After about 5 or 10 minutes in the oil, the garlic will start browning. Depending on how evenly you cut them will be how evenly they brown. I wasn't too exact with it, so I'm picking them out one at a time. It's a little tedious, but it's a little bit easier for me than breaking out a mandolin and making sure everything's perfectly even. So go ahead and drain them on a dry paper towel, and then you can set them aside until we're ready with the final plating. After you got out all that garlic, I'm reserving that chicken fat and using it to, again, saute the shallots and the ginger in it. I just did a fine dice on it, and then let that go for about another 5 minutes or so until it just starts to pick up a little bit of color. So now we're ready to start putting everything together. First thing we're going to do is add the cauliflower to a baking dish. We're going to add just about half of it into the bottom of this dish, and that's going to be the base layer of our congee mixture, essentially. After that's in there, we can add our shallots and the ginger with even a little bit of that reserved chicken fat, and just mix that into the cauliflower. That's really going to be our primary seasoning for the cauliflower, and it's going to really make it taste amazing. After you got all the shallots and ginger mixture in there, just give it a quick stir with the cauliflower. Make sure everything's evenly distributed. And then you can go in with your chicken stock. Here I'm using homemade, but if you only have store-bought, that should work perfectly as well. It's going to be about a cup to 2 cups, and you just want to get the cauliflower a little bit wet. Then you want to hit it with a little bit of fish sauce, which is quintessential to this dish. Just adds a lot of umami flavor to this dish and makes it really taste incredible. After that, you can go ahead and add your chicken thighs, skin side up, so we get that crispy chicken skin. You don't want to overcrowd the dish too much. Here I'm adding 6. You probably saw a little bit earlier that I had 10 chicken thighs ready to go, but I'll cook the other 4 separately just so it doesn't get too crowded. You can see that the cauliflower mixture is about halfway up the sides, which is a good measurement. And then you want to pop that into the oven, 400 degrees for about an hour. After about an hour, here's what the chicken looks like. You see the skin is nice and brown. The cauliflower is nice and bubbling. So this is perfect. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to separate the chicken thighs. We're going to take them out of the baking dish. Because what we're going to do next is we're actually going to puree some of the cauliflower mixture. A big portion of the original Arroz Caldo is this creamy texture that you get from the rice, which we're going to need to replicate, and we're going to do that by blending up some of our cauliflower mixture. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out half of the cauliflower mixture that's already in the baking dish, and what we'll do with that is we'll actually puree it and then add it back in. With the rest of the cauliflower that we set aside and didn't bake, we're actually going to add that right now to the baking dish. What that's going to do is the residual heat from the cauliflower that's already cooked should eliminate the rawness of the uncooked cauliflower and just cook it enough where it's a little bit of texture left, a little bit of toothsomeness, as they say, which should give it a nice texture and nice mouthfeel. And especially after we blend the cauliflower mixture that we set aside and add it back in, the resulting mixture is actually very close to what you'll find in the traditional rice porridge dish. So go ahead and add everything back together, give it a quick mix, and that's going to be our base layer of porridge. So with that, everything is pretty much done. So we're going to start putting everything together and plating it up. First thing I'm going to do is grab my bowl and start spooning some of that cauliflower porridge into the bottom of it. I'm putting a couple spoonfuls in just to entirely cover the bottom of the bowl. Feel free to add a little bit more or a little bit less depending on how much you're in the mood for. And then I'm just smoothing out the top of it. Just makes it a little bit more presentable. If you're into taking food pictures like I am, it always looks nice when that happens. And then you just throw one of those chicken thighs right on top of it, right in the middle of it. And then finally we have our garnishes. We're adding our chopped scallions. We have our fried garlic chips, which you might be able to see if it weren't for my big hand in the way. And then the last thing we have is a salted cured duck egg. If you've never seen this before, it's popular in Asian cultures. You can usually find this in a Chinese or Korean supermarket. And it's just a great hit of umami. Really great for this dish. And then the final thing we're adding is just a little bit of black vinegar. This dish needs a little bit of acidity to it, and this just helps tie everything together. And that is my keto-fied cauliflower arroz caldo. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll be back in the kitchen soon to treat my mouth with something else delicious, so stay tuned.